Welcome to my presentation on race, higher education and special educational needs and disabilities. My name is Denise Miller and I am an Associate Professor in Child and Educational Psychology at the University of Greenwich in London, UK. Now, in 2021 to 2022, the theme chosen by the British Educational Research Association, or BERA, was race and education. And in that year, BERA made 5 awards, and this study was part of those funded by the Small Grants Fund. Before I proceed, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the terminology that I will be using in this presentation. I will be using the term BAME, or Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic. However, it's important to recognise that while this term is commonly used as an umbrella term to encompass a wide range of ethnicities in the UK, it has received criticism for potentially oversimplifying the diverse experiences and histories and challenges faced by each community. So as we discuss the findings of my report, it's important to keep in mind the rich diversity of cultures that this term encompasses. Similarly, I will be using the term SEND, or Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. While this term aims to address the diverse learning requirements of individuals, we should also note and be aware that it might inadvertently label or stigmatize people based on their abilities, rather than recognizing their individual capabilities. In understanding the background of my research, we must acknowledge a history that spans over 6 decades. The prevailing notion that Black children were inherently educationally subnormal emerged as a significant concern in the 1960s. This perspective was first put forward by Cord in 1971 in his seminal work entitled How the West Indian Child is Made Educationally Subnormal in the British School System. Cord's paper resonated deeply as it addressed an alarming trend in African and Caribbean children who were labelled as ESN, or educationally subnormal. Now, Cord drew attention to the harmful consequences of such labelling, when back then this included stigmatisation, lowered expectations, school exclusion, and adverse impacts on Black children's self-esteem and their educational achievements. Now, as we fast forward over 5 decades from the publication of Cord's influential article, it's evident that significant strides have been taken to rectify the inequities within the education system in the UK. Legislation and regulatory measures have been introduced to promote equity, equality, diversity, and inclusion. One notable milestone is the implementation of the Special Educational Needs Code of Practice in 2014 and the Further Education Code of Practice. These codes comprehensively outline the roles and responsibilities of various stakeholders, including local authorities, health bodies, schools, colleges, and further education providers. Moreover, the Equality Act 2010 has emerged as a landmark legislation mandating educational institutions, including universities, to take proactive steps to make reasonable adjustments. This is supposed to ensure that students with special educational needs and disabilities can access and participate in all aspects of education, leaving no room for disparities based on ability or background. In addition to these measures, government-funded postgraduate and disabled students' allowances provide valuable support for students in universities. In summary, These initiatives and more collectively reflect the dedication to fostering an inclusive educational environment, allowing all students to achieve their full potential. So let's take a moment to celebrate the impact of this positive shift in education. The first graphic on the screen shows the BAME share of the England and Wales population, and the second graphic shows the A-level achievement of BAME students, i.e. the breakdown of students achieving AAA star or better at A-levels by ethnicity. And you will see they were largely in proportion. Likewise, this graphic shows the proportion of BAME students in different parts of the university sector. And furthermore, recent statistics shows us that the number of students from BAME backgrounds at top university is steadily increasing. However, while we have witnessed an increase in BAME student enrollment in higher education institutions or universities, it's essential to look at the latest data. Specifically, and what my study was concerned with, is the fact that although many more BAME students are studying at university, the data on access and outcomes presents a worrying picture. In a House of Commons briefing paper, Hubble and colleagues asked, how likely are different groups of young people to go to higher education? And when they get there, how likely are they to continue to the end of their course and get top grades? And how do earnings and employment vary between these groups? The findings from this study make somber reading. In short, although white pupils are less likely than any other broad ethnic group to go to university, they are least likely to drop out and most likely to achieve a first or upper second class degree. In other words, Black, Asian and minority ethnic students do not do as well at university compared to their white counterparts. In contrast, although students from Chinese, Indian and Black African backgrounds have the highest entry rates, Black students are more likely to drop out of university than any other ethnic group, and they are least likely to achieve a first or upper second class degree. In terms of getting a job, white graduates have the highest employment rates of any other ethnic group, while Chinese, Black and graduates from other ethnic groups have the lowest. Interestingly, a similar picture emerges when analysing the data concerning people who self-identify as being disabled students in higher education. The data shows a significant improvement over the last decade, with the proportion of disabled students nearly doubling from 8% in 2011 to 12 to 14.6% in 2019 to 2020. There has been a substantial increase in students with disabilities in higher education. However, similar to Black, Asian and minority ethnic students in higher education, students with reported disabilities seem to also face notable obstacles within higher education. The data reveals that, like their BAME counterparts, disabled students exhibit higher dropout rates and lower attainments of first and upper second class degrees. Interestingly, among disabled students, those facing mental health difficulties experience the most pronounced dropout rates. Moreover, the employment prospects for disabled graduates are limited, with a decreased likelihood of securing highly skilled positions. So this means Black, Asian and minority ethnic students are more likely to go to university. When they get there, however, it seems Black students, and especially students of Caribbean descent and students with disabilities, are less likely to continue to the end of their course and get top grades. And this remains the case even after prior attainment, age and gender are controlled. It is against this background that the rationale for my study, a pilot study, emerged. While using an intersectional lens, my study aimed to shed light on the unique experiences of Black, Asian and minority ethnic students with special educational needs and disabilities, and the impact of their intersecting identities on their educational journeys. Intersectionality theory, introduced by Kimberly Crenshaw, is a framework for understanding how various aspects of identity intersect and interact to shape unique experiences of discrimination and disadvantage. This theory recognizes that individuals embody multiple identities, such as race, gender, disability, and more, which cannot be examined in isolation. In my study, I applied an intersectionality lens to examine the experiences of BAME students with special educational needs and disabilities. By considering both their racial identity and disability status, I aimed to uncover the interconnectedness of discrimination within the context of higher education. I also wanted to know if anything had changed since the implementation of laws and guidances to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion. Ethical clearance was obtained from the university's Research Ethics Committee. And thereafter, all students at one London-based university were invited to complete a Qualtrics survey that included a series of demographic questions and scaled questions that were taken from various well-used surveys. There were also several open questions allowing for elaboration. The table on the slide shows the characteristics of students who self-identified as having an additional need. Within this sample of 46 participants, 21 reported that they were from a white ethnic background, 21 reported they were from a BAME ethnic background, and 4 participants did not disclose their ethnicity. Of this sample, 31 were female, 12 were male, and 3 did not disclose their gender identity. I used SPSS to analyze the survey data that was collected. This allowed us to identify patterns, trends, and statistically significant differences within the students' responses. In the process of analysis, we paid particular attention to yes and strongly disagree and strongly agree responses. When significant differences emerged between these responses from SEND and non-SEND students, we extracted and organized these differences into themes. Our analysis revealed that many students, both with special educational needs and disabilities and non-SEND students, reported experiencing various forms of interpersonal racism. Interpersonal discrimination involves a range of behaviours that occur in social interactions. They can be non-verbal or verbal in nature. It encompasses actions that treat individuals unequally due to their group membership and is often rooted in racial or ethnic identity. However, what's important to note is that students with special educational needs and disability were twice as likely than their non-SEND counterparts to disclose instances of such denigrating treatment. One student said, "I have noticed that BAME students are never given the chance to include their ideas. Even if they do, it is never taken seriously. Students completely ignore BAME students and have conversations as if they cannot see or hear them. This makes them feel uncomfortable and want to escape the whole situation. I have experienced all of these, and personally, I am now dealing with severe anxiety because I'm constantly scared to even share my thoughts in discussions. When I walk into seminars, it's like I'm invisible. Nobody wants to even look my way, and it's been made clear that this is due to my race." In other words, students with SEND were more likely than other students to report that they were victims of subtle, aversive, and direct forms of race-based interpersonal discrimination. Therefore, it might be deduced that the message conveyed to BAME students with additional needs is that their presence and their contributions are not valued by some staff and their peers. While there is a paucity of research in this area, researchers have consistently reported the prevalence of interpersonal discrimination in universities and about the harmful consequences of this. In some studies, fear of stigmatization led university students with diagnoses of autism to avoid asking for help and support. Again, in this study, I found significant differences between students' yes and strongly disagree and strongly agree responses in response or in terms of microaggressive insults. According to Su et al., microaggressive insults are subtle, often unintentional behaviors, comments, or actions that convey derogatory and discriminatory messages to individuals based on their race, gender, ethnicity, disability, or other characteristics. These actions might not be overtly hostile or intended to cause harm, but they can have significant negative impact on the recipient, contributing to feelings of exclusion, marginalization, and poor self-esteem. In my study, at roughly twice the rate, students with special educational needs and disabilities were more prone than students without special educational needs and disabilities to encounter thinly veiled comments pertaining to both their ethnicity and their intellectual capabilities. One student said, "The university appears to make too much emphasis on lowering its standards to appear to be progressive so as to increase enrollment of our non-white students. I acknowledge that people from immigrant or non-white British backgrounds might face greater difficulties in excelling within the education or the workplace, but I do not believe that this is an inherently racial issue, but more cultural. Institutions should never have to lower their standards to fill quotas. This method of progressive social mobility completely diminishes the meritocratic principles of democracy. The words of another Black, Asian, and minority ethnic student aptly points to the importance of continuing my examination of this work. I didn't plan on doing this survey, just wanted to look through the questions. But in the past few months, my life has been plagued with racism, and I thought I would give an insight into what's happened. Hope this is useful in some way, shape, or form. While additional research investigating this topic is absolutely warranted before the findings may be generalized to a larger population, there is clear evidence to suggest that special educational needs and disabilities does not affect all students in the same way. Put differently, the results from my study reveal that students with special educational needs and disabilities are much more likely to encounter specific forms of interpersonal and microaggressive discrimination simply because of their Black, Asian, or minority ethnic backgrounds. Thank you for listening, and please do not hesitate to contact me should you want to discuss my research further.